Hello and welcome to the Open Book channel. My name is Oli Ander, your designated open book, and I know it's been a while since I did a book review, but this one in particular is long overdue. I was recommended House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski, hoping I said that correctly, from a top supporter of this channel, editing client, fellow writer, and super cool guy, Lou Fritton. He was even so kind as to send me a copy of the book because I couldn't find it locally, and this book in particular is not one that you should, or even can, read digitally, and you'll see why in a minute. House of Leaves is categorized as a postmodern horror novel of a unique format. It is metafiction, but also a category that I hadn't heard of before called ergodic literature. Most of the definitions I've found for ergodic literature include other big unfamiliar terms, so to keep things simple but probably technically incorrect in my own words, it's a text that requires a non-insignificant amount of effort to understand its meaning. It needs extra exploration and dissecting through its text and its form. House of Leaves is saying more than what it's saying on the page with how it presents on the page. Does that make any sense? Not really, and that's the point. Look at this. On the left, there's a long list of texts referencing houses in literature. I think it's been going on a while in the text, and it's been a while since I read it, but on the right is upside down text in another language that may or may not be the same thing. The right square is listing all the components of a house, the left box is mirror text, there's this extra little tab here. The closer to the margins text from the top is the main text, which is a collection of essays about a video about the exploration of an improbable house, with associated references and information at the bottom to justify its points, and it's all a fucking lie. Well, overall, the text is fiction, and I am not one dedicated enough to cross-reference everything with reality because there is a lot. Why is House of Leaves like that, you may be asking? Well, it's because it is the embodiment of its own mystery. House of Leaves manifests its form into existence as a story within a story. House of Leaves is several layers deep. If I were to explain it in the most chronological way possible, a guy named Johnny Truant discovers the writings of a man named Zampano who died before publication. Zampano's writings were a scattered collection of essays and references recounting and dissecting a collection of videos called the Navidson Record. The Navidson Record documents a family that discovers an impossible space in their house. What starts as a realization that the house is bigger on the inside than the outside spirals into finding a dimension-defying hallway that morphs into an ever-shifting and existential dread-inspiring liminal space that may very well be hell itself. We, the readers, experience House of Leaves as the collection of Zampano's writing that Johnny has pieced together, and how. The book includes references that Zampano wrote, additional notes from Johnny, and further footnotes from the eventual publisher. Johnny adds context for some things odd or missing about the writing, like explaining why one chapter has a bunch of X's in it, or missing parts because the paper was burned, had ink spilled on it, was lost, etc. Johnny also keeps a bit of a diary in the footnotes of his own life and how it changes since he takes on the task of compiling Zampano's notes. It becomes his obsession and his life derails. Not only is the concept of the Navidson Record one of slow existential dread, and the far too deep autopsy on the affected family members, it's also not real. Despite the sheer amount of detail and dedication Zampano put into his findings, Johnny can't find evidence that the videotapes ever really existed, fiction or not. So how and why did Zampano make all this up? Why did Johnny get so engrossed in the pursuit of the truth that it starts to drive him mad? And why are we reading House of Leaves? House of Leaves is the fiction that we're reading about. We're taking the journey that Johnny is on, or rather, we're the Johnny to the edition that Johnny creates of Zampano's dissertation on the Navidson Record, because we too need to be actively engaging with the text, trying to figure out what's real and what's fake, and what does it all mean. The amount of time I would have to take to untangle what parts of House of Leaves are real is time that I do not have, because some of it is at least based on real other texts, and that is true both within the text and of the text. Johnny tracks down people who worked with Zampano before his passing, who had to help him write his papers because he was blind, and he finds out that a lot of the information around the Navidson Record are fabricated from other actual texts. Everything about the Navidson record has like a dozen research papers referenced and excerpt to support the narrative Zampano was constructing, offering many viewpoints on all the seemingly minute, inconsequential details about this non-existent film. At times, it seems like Zampano was just picking up whatever he read and adding it to the mix like some kind of writing exercise, but it all manages to come together into the most overanalyzed essay that I have ever read. Every chapter has a sort of theme that reflects across each of the narratives in the story, from the Navidson record itself, to what Zampano wanted to say about the characters in it, to what Johnny is going through while transcribing. An easy example of how roundabout things are is the chapter that opens on examining the word echo. It talks about echoes' origins in mythology, how echoes work scientifically and their repetition and diminishing return of sound, then on to the unique physics, or lack thereof, of echoes present in the liminal space explored by the Navidson record. Some of the facts about echoes are true, even if their application in the text is not, and obviously, echo as a fixation works meta-narratively, as the effect of this story's core echoes all the way out to Johnny, to us. House of Leaves is masterful in its facade. It never lets up or compromises on how dry but necessary proper references are to make Zampano's dissertation feel real. The character pieces Zampano constructs, of those in the Navidson record, are cutting. It genuinely reads like there's thousands of academic eyes all watching, dissecting, and having the most out-of-left field opinions about every little detail of Navidson and his family's lives. Although Johnny only exists in the margins of the text, he is his own enigma. Zampano's work may present as the inciting incident to Johnny's downward spiral, but it was definitely in progress before that. House of Leaves has tiers of unreliable narrators, from how Navidson chose to present his film, to everything Zampano made up about academics discussing it, to everything Johnny isn't really telling us about himself, and eventually, at the end of the book, Johnny's mother, whose letters to Johnny display her declining mental health and warped sense of reality. Not only are there unreliable narrators all the way down, they're fake. Literally and figuratively. Navidson and his film weren't real, Zampano is probably just an excuse to frame the story this way, and Johnny, who is primarily characterized as a storyteller first and a liar second, so it was probably just all him start to finish. But he is also just fictional, written by the author, Mark Z. Danielewski. House of Leaves has an invisible structure of trauma coping, dressed up as a text dissecting a film, hiding a bunch of existential dread. That's the trench coat. There are parts of the text where the physical form lends to the bizarre narrative. When the description of the Navidson record hits its peaks, the writing on the pages mimics what's happening. And I get that some parts of the text are designed to make the reader feel claustrophobic. Others, you have to physically interact with the book by flipping it around, upside down, but not all of them totally landed for me. The picture I showed of the box and mirror text on the page follows a character taking a sample from the wall from The Impossible Void. The book adopts the story through its formatting and, in true meta fashion, posits the question, is the book House of Leaves the house from the Navidson record? And that's cool. One of the most engrossing parts of the text is when Navidson is lost in the void, reading and burning a book as he goes as his only source of stimuli, frantic to delay being consumed, mind and body by this space, this thing, and it convinces you that this is that book. But it can't be. That's my biggest criticism of House of Leaves. Although I can appreciate how thoroughly it committed to the bit, there is so much fluff. That fluff lends to its authenticity, but if you're really dedicated to not missing any clues, that can end up in a lot of your time spent for very little payoff. As someone who is incapable of skimming, I started off reading all the make-believe footnotes, and I'm sure there's a lot to those that are witty or Easter eggs, but without going out of my way to Google each one and whether it is real or to what degree, they're not worth much of anything and occupy a large percentage of the ink and paper of the book. I appreciate House of Leaves as an object and the concept it embodies, so I'm not complaining about the resources spent on the illusion so much as how much illusion was necessary, because Zampano's dissertation jargon is the most boring part. That said, although all the philosophizing about the Navidson record is commentary on a non-existent point, it can be oddly interesting to read when you're in the mood for it. I did like the exploration of what an echo is. Sometimes the essays around the Navidson record are more engaging than the story of Navidson himself, but other parts feel like an unnecessary slog. Since all of it is needed to construct the illusion of House of Leaves, I found it impossible to pick and choose what to read, as even the most innocuous details could be relevant, which made for a very tiring read. My reading experience consisted of picking it up, reading about 10 pages, then putting it back down and coming back next week. Although I realize that may not be possible for other people's knowledge retention, and this book may just not be attainable for some people. House of Leaves took me about a year to read, I think. That would be an extreme point against any other book, but this is kind of what House of Leaves wants, so it's hard to criticize it. House of Leaves is such a hard book to make commentary on because you know, even when you're in the thick of it, how intentional it all is. House of Leaves doesn't care that I'm bored or don't get something, or will never truly grasp the meaning of fucking most of it. It says in the front of the text, this is not for you. There are some excellent prose in House of Leaves, but the truly gripping excerpts are few and far between. To be fair, the whole thing demonstrates a masterful craft of language. I was often dumbfounded by how articulately Zampano could speak on or argue against a point of reference on the Navidson record, which I know doesn't actually exist, but it feels like it must. The use of that supreme skill of language was just, unfortunately, boring by design. It's meant to lull you into a false sense of security for when the existential dread starts to seep in, and those bits of horror were my favorite part, both in Johnny's spiraling and the fascinating nature of the Navidson's house. I would go further into some theories on what it all means and some of the clues scattered throughout the text, but I think it's far better if I leave that open to the thrill of exploration for those who may want to read it. Although I love a good theory, with this, there's not much joy to be found in the text if you don't interact with it yourself and put the clues together of why and how this is one big Russian doll named Johnny. Whether House of Leaves is worth reading depends entirely on not just your personal investment in the story and characters, but your curiosity. And I can understand that, for a lot of people, it's not a good book, because it is more than a book. It's a House of Leaves. I only gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars because the reading experience needed to reflect somewhere. I was fully captivated in some spots, and ready to never bother picking the book up again in others. I think it would help some people to be given guidance on what to invest their mental energy, but that also takes the fun out of it. If I told you which pages had the best bits or the clues and what they mean, they wouldn't be the best bits anymore, because they rely on the contrast and framing of everything else. So, it's not a book whose only worth exists in hindsight, but I've certainly read much shorter, less convoluted texts that have engaged me more after the fact as well. What does House of Leaves say about the author? I have no idea. If you want a synopsis and theories on House of Leaves, I enjoyed this video, The Book That Lies to You, House of Leaves Explained by Pugser, and if you have any other associated video recommendations, feel free to drop them in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to support me, this channel, or all of the other stuff that I do, there will be links in the description below, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.